The final episode of Stranger Things has finally been released, and there is a lot to talk about. The finale gave us many big moments, but also raised many questions. We saw the Mind Flayer return, one character death that felt a bit disappointing, and possibly another death depending on how you understand the ending. We also got a very long 45-minute epilogue that honestly could have been much shorter. One of the biggest questions comes from something Mike said at the end. What did his story really mean? Was it just a story or something more? Today, we are going to break down all the biggest questions surrounding the Stranger Things Season 5 finale and explain what really happened. Just a warning before we begin, this explanation contains spoilers. Did 11 actually die? One of the biggest questions after the finale is very simple, but very important. Did 11 actually die? At first, the show clearly wants us to believe that she did. The group succeeds in killing both Vecna and the Mind Flayer because they are connected through the hive mind. It is revealed that the Mind Flayer did not use Henry as a simple body, but instead actually needed him. Once that connection is broken, the group escapes the abyss and prepares to destroy the Upside Down using the exotic matter bomb. Everyone makes it back to the real world, except 11. She stays behind near the gate to the Upside Down. She knows that if she returns, there will always be people like Dr. Brenner and Dr. K who will hurt her friends just to get to her and create more children like her. Because of this, she chooses to stay behind while the Upside Down is destroyed. This moment strongly suggests that 11 sacrificed herself and died. However, the finale then does something unexpected. 18 months later, we see Mike telling a story during a Dungeons & Dragons game. In this story, the mage, who clearly represents 11, tricks everyone using Carly's powers. It makes it seem like she was destroyed along with the Upside Down, but in reality, she survives and goes off to live peacefully in a paradise far away. This story connects back to something Hopper said earlier about life having two paths. One path is where Mike blames himself forever for 11's death. The other is where he accepts her choice and finds peace. I believe this story was not meant to confirm that 11 survived. Instead, it was meant to show different ways people can cope with loss. Personally, I do not believe 11 survived. Carly was already dead long before 11 reached the gate or entered the abyss, so the timeline does not make sense for Carly's powers to save her. Also, 11's idea of paradise was never some distant place. Her paradise was being with her friends, the people who accepted her and treated her like family. That was the entire message of the show from the very beginning. Because of this, I firmly believe 11 did die, and the story Mike told was simply a way for him and the audience to find peace. Vecna's death and his connection to the Mind Flayer. When it comes to Vecna's death, we finally learn why he could not enter the cave earlier in the season. The reason was that the Mind Flayer was controlling and restricting him. Eventually, Vecna forces himself into the memory where he first encountered the Mind Flayer. This is where my biggest disappointment begins. Henry opening the case and showing his darkness felt more like an advertisement for the stage play The First Shadow, rather than a real explanation of his past. We do see Henry with the evil look in his eyes again, similar to Season 4, which I liked. Will, who is connected to Henry through the hive mind, tries to stop him from fighting 11. Will tells him that Henry was once like him, just a vessel, but Henry says that the Mind Flayer needed him. I do not believe that is true. I think this moment shows Henry's weakness. The scientists warned him that the Mind Flayer would consume him and everything else. The Mind Flayer made Henry believe he was special, when in reality, he was being used. It is then revealed that Vecna's lair is actually inside the dormant shell of the Mind Flayer. When it awakens, the group must fight in the abyss. Vecna is connected directly underneath the Mind Flayer's heart. As 11 fights Vecna and Will interferes, Vecna is pierced by a spick in the Mind Flayer's core. Honestly, this fight was very disappointing. Something about the final episode of Stranger Things Season 5 feels off. Not loud, not chaotic, just quietly unsettling. Because when the screen faded to black, it didn't feel like the story truly ended. It felt like something was taken away before it was fully shown. Yes, the Mind Flayer returned. Yes, Vecna was finally defeated. Yes, the world was saved. But here's the problem. It all felt too easy. For a show built on fear, sacrifice, and impossible odds, the finale strangely lacked danger. Characters survived moments that should have killed them. Deaths that should have shattered us barely landed. And the biggest question of all, did 11 actually die? Was left completely up to interpretation. Then there was the 45-minute epilogue, a long goodbye, filled with time jumps, life updates, and emotional wrap-ups that felt more like a checklist than a conclusion. Some fans loved it. Others felt it drained all the tension the finale worked so hard to build. And what about Mike's final story? Was it just a Dungeons & Dragons game? Or was it the show quietly telling us how we're supposed to feel about 11's fate? Tonight, we're breaking everything down. We're talking about 11's ending, Vecna's true role, the Mind Flayer's disappointing return, what really happened to each character, and whether Stranger Things ended the way it deserved. This is Stranger Things Season 5, the finale ending explained. What did you think of the ending? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more Stranger Things videos, check out the playlist and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Did 11 really die? From the moment 11 stayed behind in the Upside Down, the show wanted us to feel one thing: fear. Everyone else escapes, the gate is closing, the bomb is ready, and 11 is still standing there, alone. This moment feels final. Throughout the series, 11 has always been the one sacrificing herself. From Season 1 to Season 4, she constantly puts herself in danger to protect her friends. So when she chooses to stay behind while the Upside Down is destroyed, it feels like the natural end of her journey. She believes as long as she exists, people like Dr. Brenner will continue hunting her. They'll hurt her friends just to reach her. So instead of running, she makes a choice. She stays. The explosion happens, the Upside Down collapses, and 11 is gone. At least that's what we're meant to believe. But then the finale jumps forward 18 months and everything changes. Mike tells a story during a Dungeons & Dragons game. In this story, the mage, clearly representing 11, tricks everyone. It looks like she dies, but in reality she survives and escapes to a peaceful paradise far away. This moment is confusing on purpose. The show never confirms whether this is true or just a story, and that's where the debate begins. Some fans believe 11 survived, others believe she died. But when you look closely at the timeline, survival doesn't make sense. Carly, the character whose powers are supposedly used in Mike's story, was already dead before 11 reached the gate. She was gone before the abyss. That means she couldn't have helped 11 fake her death. More importantly, 11's idea of happiness was never isolation. Her paradise was Hopper. Her paradise was Mike. Her paradise was her friends. Running away to live alone somewhere else directly contradicts everything the show taught us about her. Mike's story isn't proof of survival, it's proof of grief. Hopper once told Mike that life has two roads, one where you blame yourself forever, and one where you accept loss and move forward. Mike's story is him choosing the second road, not rewriting reality, but learning how to live with it, which means the hardest truth is the most likely one. 11 died. Vecna, Henry, and the Mind Flayer's true power. Vecna's death should have been terrifying. Instead, it was quick. To understand why this feels wrong, we need to talk about Henry. Henry was never truly in control. From the very beginning, the Mind Flayer manipulated him. When Henry says the Mind Flayer needed him, it sounds powerful, but it's actually tragic. The scientists warned him. They told him to resist. They knew the Mind Flayer consumes everything it touches. Henry didn't control the darkness controlled him. The reveal that Vecna's lair is inside the dormant shell of the Mind Flayer is a great idea, but the execution falls short. The Mind Flayer awakens, but instead of feeling like an unstoppable force, it feels like a boss fight that ends too soon. Vecna is pierced, the heart turns black, the threat ends. This is the same creature that haunted 4 seasons, the same presence that corrupted Hawkins, and it goes down without truly threatening the main group. In Season 4, Vecna felt unstoppable. His kills were slow, painful, and terrifying. In the finale, he barely feels dangerous at all. Joyce killing Vecna is emotionally strong, but narratively rushed. She had little presence in the finale, yet she received one of the most important scenes. Once Vecna dies and the Mind Flayer's heart turns black, the threat is over. Too easily. What happened to the characters in the end? During the epilogue, we see where everyone ends up. Hopper and Joyce get engaged and plan to move away so Hopper can take a new job. Will moves away to a place where he can truly be himself. Mike becomes a writer. Dustin continues studying and chasing knowledge while still loving adventure. Lucas and Max end up together and settle down. Steve becomes a baseball coach. Jonathan continues making films. Robin works at a radio station. Nancy leaves Emerson and starts working at the Herald. They all promise to meet once a month because their friendship matters too much to lose. We also see a new generation, Holly and her friends playing Dungeons & Dragons in the basement. This shows that the spirit of adventure will continue, even though the original group has put their binders away for the last time. Final review of the Season 5 finale. This finale had moments I liked and moments I really did not like. It felt very choppy. The CGI was weak in places, making Vecna and the Mind Flayer feel far less threatening than before. Once they were defeated, there was still a lot of time left, which made me think something else would happen, but nothing did. Season 4 was clearly the best season. Vecna was terrifying back then. In this finale, I never felt afraid. There were no real stakes. It always felt like the group was going to win. Eleven's death was powerful until the show made it unclear on purpose. Carly's death had little emotional impact. Steve's near death was teased but quickly undone, which felt cheap. The 45-minute epilogue dragged on far too long and relied heavily on old movie cliches. Some acting performances also felt weaker, especially compared to earlier seasons. That said, the Hopper and Eleven moments were emotional, and learning more about Henry's connection to the Mind Flayer was exciting, at least at first. Overall, the ending was okay. Not terrible, not amazing. The story simply needed more time, an entire extra volume, to properly explore the abyss, the Mind Flayer's return, and a final battle worthy of everything the show built up. Final thoughts. Stranger Things will still be remembered as a great show. The finale did not ruin it. It just did not fully deliver what the story and the fans deserved. Writing an ending is hard, and while this one wasn't perfect, it was acceptable. That is the Stranger Things Season 5 finale ending explained. What did you think of the ending? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more Stranger Things videos, check out the playlist and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. When everything is said and done, the ending of Stranger Things leaves us in a strange place. Not angry, not satisfied, just quietly reflective. And maybe that was always the point. This finale does not explode with chaos. It does not shock us with massive twists at the very last second. Instead, it slowly closes the door on a world we have lived in for nearly a decade. And while that door does close, it never really locks. It leaves space for interpretation, for debate, and for feelings that do not have clean answers. The biggest example of this is 11. Whether you believe she lived or died says a lot about how you personally connect to the story. If you believe she survived, then the ending is about hope. It is about choosing peace after suffering. It is about a child who was hurt her entire life finally escaping the cycle of pain. But if you believe she died, then the ending becomes something much heavier. It becomes a story about sacrifice, about choosing others over yourself, about a hero who saved the world not by winning, but by letting go. And the show never tells us which one is correct. Instead, it lets Mike tell a story. That final Dungeons and Dragons scene is not there to give us facts, it is there to give us comfort. Mike is not rewriting history, he's rewriting his pain. He's choosing a version of events that allows him to keep living. And in many ways, that is the most human ending the show could give us. The same goes for Vecna and the Mind Flayer. Were they defeated too easily? Yes. Did they feel less terrifying than before? Absolutely. But maybe the show was not trying to scare us anymore. Maybe it was trying to remind us that the real horror was never just monsters or the upside down. It was trauma, loss, fear, and growing up too fast. By the time season 5 ends, the characters are no longer children, and because of that, the fear changes. The monsters are no longer unstoppable because the characters are no longer powerless. That does not mean the finale was perfect, far from it. The stakes felt low for something that threatened the entire world. Fake-out deaths weakened emotional impact. The epilogue dragged longer than it needed to, and some storylines like Will's powers and Holly's importance never fully paid off. These are valid criticisms, but they do not erase what the show achieved overall. Stranger Things was never just about monsters. It was about friendship, about being different, about finding people who accept you when the world does not. And in that sense, the finale stayed true to its core, even if the execution stumbled. The final image of a new generation playing Dungeons and Dragons is not meant to excite us with what comes next. It is meant to reassure us that the spirit of adventure, imagination, and courage never truly ends. Stories move on, people grow up, but what they pass down still matters. And maybe that is why this ending feels the way it does. Not triumphant, not devastating, just complete enough. So the real question is not whether Stranger Things ended perfectly. The real question is, did it end honestly? For some of you, the answer will be yes. For others, it will be no. And that disagreement is exactly what keeps this ending alive. Now I want to hear from you. Do you believe 11 survived, or do you believe she died? Did Vecna feel weaker to you in the finale, or was his end fitting? And be honest, did that 45-minute epilogue work for you, or did it drag? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them all, and this is one of those endings where every opinion matters. If you enjoyed this deep breakdown and want more Stranger Things content, including theories, deleted scenes, alternate endings, and unanswered questions, check out the playlist linked on screen right now. And if you do not want to miss future videos like this, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. There is still so much to talk about when it comes to this show, and this conversation is far from over. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking with this journey, and I will see you in the next video. As the screen fades to black for the final time, one thing becomes clear. Stranger Things was never really about monsters. Yes, there were Demogorgons. Yes, there was the Mind Flayer. Yes, there was Vecna, the Upside Down, and worlds colliding. But at its heart, Stranger Things was always about people. It was about kids who felt like outsiders, about friendships that felt stronger than family, about growing up in a world that suddenly becomes more complicated, more painful, and more confusing than you ever expected. And that's why this ending hits differently for everyone who watches it. Some people finish the finale feeling satisfied, others feel disappointed, some feel emotional, some feel empty, and none of those reactions are wrong. Because endings aren't just about stories ending, they're about us letting go. For nearly a decade, Stranger Things was something familiar, something comforting. It was a show many people grew up with. Some watched it as kids and finished it as adults. Some watched it with friends. Some watched it alone. But for all of us, it became part of our lives in some small way. And now, it's over. That's why the finale feels quieter than expected. That's why the final episode spends so much time showing us what comes after the adventure, instead of one last massive fight. The show is not trying to shock us anymore. It's trying to say goodbye. That long epilogue, as flawed as it may be, is not really about wrapping up plot points. It's about reminding us that life continues after the danger ends, that people move on, that friendships change, but they don't disappear, and that in some ways, the bravest thing you can do is accept that a chapter of your life has closed. Eleven's story reflects that more than anything else. Whether you believe she lived or died, her journey is complete. She started as a scared child who didn't understand the world, who was used, hurt, and controlled. She ends as someone who makes her own choice, no matter how painful that choice may be. That alone is powerful. And Mike's final story reminds us that stories aren't always about facts. Sometimes they're about healing. Sometimes they're about giving ourselves permission to remember things in a way that allows us to keep going. That is not weakness. That is growth. The same applies to the rest of the group. They don't ride off into the sunset together. They don't promise to stay the same forever. They drift apart, find new paths, and build new lives. That is not a betrayal of their friendship. That is what growing up actually looks like. Not every goodbye needs to be dramatic. Some goodbyes are quiet. Some goodbyes feel unfinished. Some goodbyes hurt because they remind us of our own. And maybe that is why this ending feels the way it does. Because Stranger Things was never just telling a story, it was reflecting something real. The fear of change, the sadness of endings, the hope that even when things fall apart, something meaningful remains. Was the finale perfect? No. It had pacing issues, it had underdeveloped moments, it had missed opportunities. It could have pushed harder, gone darker, and taken more risks. And it's completely fair to feel disappointed by those choices. But imperfection doesn't erase impact. The show still gave us characters we cared about, moments we'll remember, and themes that stayed consistent from the very beginning to the very end. Friendship matters. Love matters. Choice matters. And sometimes the most important victories are not about winning, but about protecting what matters most, even if it costs you something. That's what makes this ending linger. Not the monsters, not the effects, not the twists, but the feeling. The feeling of watching something you loved come to a close. And maybe that's exactly how it was meant to end. Not with a scream, not with a jump scare, but with a quiet understanding that the adventure shaped these characters and us, and that its impact will remain long after the screen goes black. So as we step away from Hawkins for the final time, the best thing we can do is carry the story with us. Talk about it, debate it, rewatch it, remember what it meant to us at different points in our lives. Because even though Stranger Things has ended, the memories haven't. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this journey, and I will see you in the next video.